Session 367 deleted. October 1st, 1967. Sunday. Rob note, July 14, 1971. When sessions resume, check with Seth about what Jane might have blocked in this session, as well as what she revealed. My part, principally, see pendulum of this date. This session appears to be basic, but perhaps parts pertaining to me were blocked, to spare my feelings. This session is not included in the records, since it deals with personal material. I asked for it this evening because Jane was not feeling well, and indeed had seemed to decline since the New York trip in August. This afternoon, while painting, the thought came to me that Jane's trouble was that she was avoiding success, and the success was looming ever closer with the advertising campaign planned for her ESP book, the near completion of the dream book. In the 315th session for July 6, 1967, is a sentence which has stayed with me. When Seth said, "Rupert has an unfortunate sense of unworthiness, without which the situation Jane's symptoms could not have developed." I wondered if the unworthy feeling and the fact of success could be linked through the symptoms. Jane did not volunteer this session. I had to ask for it. She has never volunteered a session with her symptoms. She began to speak rapidly, in a somewhat odd-sounding, almost muffled voice, and with her eyes closed. See the deleted session for November 26, 1972, in Volume 2 of these personal sessions. Seth said, "Good evening. What we have here is a deep struggle between various needs, a struggle between various portions of the personality, each with their own demands and interpretations of reality. If the possibility of success had never emerged, the problem would never have emerged. It was unfortunately a cue point, and itself the time bomb of which Rupert spoke." Rob note, before the session tonight. Seth said, "There is one part of the self, confident, assured of its abilities, and somewhat demanding, rather powerful. It has to this point driven the personality onward despite all obstacles. It never admitted the personality of failure, but only worked towards success. Now, to the other portion of the personality, however, success was failure. This part of the personality remained relatively quiet until the other portion began to achieve its end. This portion considered itself not only unworthy but evil. It is basically an overgrown and almost cancerous superconscious that applied brakes in the past to some extent and now has largely taken over. It believes it works for the good. It mistrusts all spontaneity. It believes the personality must be toned down, held in bounds, slowed down, or else the wrath of God will descend upon it. It is not rational. The physical not being able to run, the slowing of motions, are all physical manifestations. This is the Irish grandmother, the mother, and the neighborhood shouting, "Jane, do not run!" Though consciously disobeying as a child, the suggestions took deep root. Spontaneity was evil. The spontaneous ran out of control. This has something to do with the mother talking to the child about the father. He was uncontrolled, uncontrollable, lax, slow, and yet evil. The poor were virtuous and on the side of God. The rich would never attain heaven. This is Rupert's penance, you see, put upon him by this other part of his personality. If he succeeds, he must pay. For if he does not pay, if he does not willingly submit to his own punishment, then there is eternal damnation. There must be self-sacrifice, to some degree self-mutilation. And even hence, you see the loss of weight. The dark side of the mystic, I am afraid. For every act he considers uncharitable or sarcastic, he must pay. The horrid point, for let you see, he believes he must pay. The irony, of course, is carefully chosen. Let he choose those symptoms that remind him of his mother. For she flaunted the neighborhood and the Irish background physically in her youth, and paid. And Rupert fought it intellectually and feels he must pay. The whole psychic framework is against the Catholic training. This also has something to do with this. The Crowders representing money, you see, appall him. He expects the wrath of God to fall upon them at any time. He hates them because he considers them evil, because they are wealthy. The old car, our fault, is a badge of virtue to Rupert, since it is old and decrepit. It is a sign of safety. Rupert's student Venus must have her weight, or she fears destruction. Rupert must have his failure and relative poverty, or he fears destruction. If this were the whole personality, this would be no problem. He would avoid success like a plague. He would have been successful long before this. However, the other portion of the personality is spontaneous, highly gifted, creative, intuitive, and loves luxury. This last being deeply hidden from the conscious personality. Scrounging about, taking second-hand items, allows him to accumulate some extras with impunity, because they are not new. He is deeply afraid of finishing his book for fear it will sell. He sends out messages praising for the success of his original book, and sends out equally strong ones urging that it not be accepted, that it is not a huge success. This is the original book. Rob note, the ESP book. Seth said, he fears destruction in the terms of being a complete cripple. To avoid this, he adopts the symptoms, hoping to cheat his idea of the gods, or fate. To have the disease or punishment, and still not have it, to satisfy both demands. The New York trip in August, his response to it, was largely responsible for the setback. He believes also that he must therefore accept any disability and discomfort because it is just punishment. The other portion rises up in arms and forces him to demand success. When you did not expect success, really, then you did not threaten him. Now you expect success, and he feels even beforehand an added threat. Then he will have to suffer for you both, he feels. Running is symbolic. He could run, his mother could not. She was evil, but if he is successful, Then he believes he will be successful when he does not deserve it. Therefore, evil also, and so he should not run, running being symbolic of spontaneity. If he gives himself emotional and psychic freedom, then to compensate he will deny himself physical freedom. I have been a safeguard, for I was between him and complete spontaneity, you see. I was enough like his father trainer to be safe, and without me his psychic abilities would not have matured at all. I will not be dispensed with. He cannot afford it. Also, I am legitimate enough and independent enough in my own right. He has no use for women, and women are not supposed to succeed. I am legitimate. His needs and personality were the reason, however, that he could communicate with me. He would never have communicated with, say, any female counterpart of me. I have literally held his personality together for some time in relative balance. He has never been mentally unbalanced, and he has avoided this and any deep emotional difficulty. The physical illness, however, has taken their place. All in all, a much safer arrangement. The difficulties began with the selling of the first paperback and were accentuated later. The development of abilities and the ESP book represent an effort by the spontaneous self to express itself, for this other portion of the personality was ready then to take over, and it then retaliated with the beginning of symptoms. When this portion is operating, he does not dare enjoy the pleasures of love. No one in his neighborhood did, you see. He denies himself then out of fear. When he succeeds, he punishes himself. When he fails the other, spontaneous, self rises up in arms. The two warring factions have been beating him apart. Rob asked, how come this material is allowed to come through now? Seth said, wait. The overly conscious self, however, is also the teacher, and in the classes, the two elements do to some extent combine with some overall benefit. The overconscious self expounds, you see. These two warring elements are deeply bound up in psychic work, because they were deeply bound up early in religious and mystic connotations in Catholic upbringing. Now, Rupert's early mystic life was also bound up with priestesses who were males, with whom one could not have any sexual relationship. He is now bound up with you in these endeavors. While he is so confused, then sexual relationship with you also becomes evil. He also felt compelled to follow the advice of the priestess whether or not he agreed with it. This led to his passivity as far as you were concerned. If you were jealous of his success, he should not have it, and it must be plucked out. The New York trip frightened him by its success. He felt he needed the punishment of the program, Ellenberg TV, and you helped him avoid it. One remark or circumstance will be acute to one or the other portions of the personality, which will then take over. He will be free or constrained, you see, until the next trigger point is given. His mother's letter, received last week and containing an old picture of her, followed by the weekend visit, Rob note with the Crowders and my parents. Seth said was the trigger point this time. He is still at a point where he must be saint or devil. He has had difficulties on Fridays because he eats meat on Fridays, and difficulties Sunday because he does not go to church. He is afraid of the bed and the bedroom. He fears he will die in his sleep and face eternal damnation. There are no windows to escape through. He feels no available roof. He feels freer under all circumstances in his room, the living room, because he could run out onto the roof. The physical symptoms therefore frighten him severely in that he does not run. He thinks you do not want him to talk about his past because you are ashamed of it. The material is coming through simply because he is desperate. Both portions of the personality are frightened. One portion fears success is coming regardless of all its attempts to hold it back. The other fears that it is being restrained despite all efforts to escape. The body is the worrying point, and it is itself now fatigued. At times, the personality has reconciled these elements and served to express them both. The high-low book of poetry, as contrast to perhaps the idiot points, will explain what I mean. It is a great help then for Ruber to write his poetry. This station will in itself be of benefit, for it is the first clear sign you have had of the true situation. Ruber asked me for help today, and this is my answer and my help. Rap note: I did not know this. In suggesting we have a session tonight, Jen asked Seth for help this afternoon before taking a nap. Seth said, when the overconscious portion is made to understand that the spontaneous self is good, then the problem will cease. The psychic classes have been of help for this reason. The overconscious portion always trusted the spontaneous self as far as poetry was concerned, but distrusted spontaneity otherwise. Success, tied in with psychic work, can represent his main hope, and perhaps the one main door through which the whole personality can emerge united and intact. The preaching element was always strong. The poetry went against the church, but here the overconscious self was able to realize the church's limitations and went alone. Success as a point would present no difficulties. The overconscious self was not about to permit the spontaneous self this new freedom, however. The early philosophical poetry represents a philosophy of pessimism. Stripped to its core, it was the good or suffer damnation word. The later poetry represents joy and psychic work spontaneity. Yet a conciliation is possible. The overconscious self must be shown that the spontaneous self is the God self. If this is done, it will add its strength to the purpose of the spontaneous self. Otherwise, it will fight the spontaneous self even to the death. It disapproves of anything it does not consider godly. There is no reason why it will not listen, however, and gladly. Because of its very nature, it wants to attach it. Because of its very nature, it wants to attach itself to and work for what it considers the good. It has been held within severe limitations and working under a false premise. It is trying to restrain Ruber from doing that which is wrong. As it realizes through re-education that the spontaneous self is good, the sense of unworthiness will vanish. It has believed from the beginning that spontaneity was sinful. This was the misinterpretation given in early training. It then set itself up against the spontaneous self and determined to keep it within bounds. Success is taboo from the unworthy only, you see. When the overconscious self learns that the spontaneous self is not unworthy, then success is permissible. If success allows for the furthering of ideas which are good, then success will become a need for the overconscious self also, and a further reconciliation will take place. Do you see the steps here then that can be taken? Rob said, yes. You are extremely important in all of this, and you can do much to make Ruber understand. Because of the early training, you have somewhat assumed a position like those of the priests, and your word becomes extremely important, and almost like a law. Hence, his passivity in many instances and his avoidance of sex. You can use this to advantage, however, as you explain the situation to him, for your words have almost magical import at this time. Now that we have reached the true difficulty beneath all else, there should be a good improvement. Steady application will be needed, however, and your part as educator is highly important. Do you have questions? Rob asked, can he walk alone and finish the dream book? Seth said, with an understanding of this material, yes. And the poetry should also be written. I believe session itself should bring him some considerable relief, but it will not last unless the points given are hammered in. Rob asked, should we keep coming back to this plan in sessions? Seth said, you should. The overconscious self, you see, has not trusted me, nor the sessions, and hampered help I could give. It realized it is in jeopardy, however, and the classes have served to open a way of understanding. Rob asked, the overconscious self should be able to see the benefits of the sessions and the classes, shouldn't it? Seth said, it has largely in the past refused to do so. Rob asked, it is more willing to see now? Seth said, it is now to some extent. It gave some consent to me in the beginning, but would go no further. Rob said, I think this is the first time I have seen Jane lay down during a session. Seth said, he is exhausted and in a deeper trance than usual. Rob said, well, I can think of more questions later. Seth said, we will then close our session. The very fact that it has been held represents a turning point for the better, you see. Rob asked, can the overconscious self literally black material of this kind? Seth said, it has. When it realizes that the spontaneous self is a God self, then it will actively help Ruber. Rob asked, suppose the overconscious self blacks this kind of material next session. Is this likely to happen? Seth said, it may according to circumstance, but it will not always. Rob said, then we can keep trying for it. Seth said, that was my meaning. It should be less inclined to do so as a result of this material. Rob said, if a session... Seth said, it is a relatively new idea to the overconscious self, that the spontaneous self is good and a part of the God self. When this is complete seen, there will be an integration of personality that will result in powerful work and a definite unchallenged success. Rob said, I was going to say that if I asked for this type of material during a session, it's likely to come through at least to some extent, isn't it? Seth said, it should come through more clearly now. Rob said, okay. Seth said, the overconscious self has blocked many of Rupert's impressions in the past. Rob asked, in sessions or on his own? Seth said, both, particularly on his own. The Father Ryan influence, and he also had back trouble. Father Doran was seen as a spontaneous but evil man. Father Ryan was seen as rigid and uncompromising, but good. Father Ryan gave Rupert his first typewriter, and a desk, and a bed. Now, do you see those connections? Rob said, yes. Seth said, the priest's visit on Sunday afternoon. The main visits were held in the mother's bedroom. If you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them, or we will end. Rob asked, then say a few words about my bent penis. Seth said, this is connected with Rupert, of course, and you feel your purpose is bent from its main direction, in that you are not painting full time. Rob asked, how about the hand tremor? Seth said, your paintings also represent songs to you. Hence, their effect appears in the penis, you see. The tremor, a reflection or what you feel to be a shaky situation. Rob said, we can go into this later. Seth said, we will end. Give Rupert a sip of wine. Rob said, yes. Can you give him some beneficial suggestions tonight? Seth said, I will indeed. Rob asked, have his drinks contained any clues to this material tonight? Seth said, he has blocked many of them. Clues were there. Rob said, okay, good night, Seth. Rob noted, Jane still lay flat out, her eyes closed. She came out of trance slowly.